Hi, welcome to Punch Perfect Boxing. Now in this video what I'd like to do is take a little look back at the career of Gennady Golovkin, Triple G, his career to date, and right at the end of the video I'd like to do a little bit on his new trainer Johnathon Banks and maybe ways that Banks might improve or do some adjustments with Gennady. Now I first heard about Golovkin must be around 2000. A lot of reports were coming out, especially in the boxing papers, that he was a very skilled amateur and had all the potentials and could go a long way. Caught some glimpses of him at the 2002 World Amateur Boxing Championships. Nothing really to go on, but he looked good, and it's a tournament he won the gold medal in. But they're only highlights, only clips. First time I had a chance to study Golovkin was at the 2004 Olympics in Athens. Did really well, got through to the semi-finals where he faced Andre Durrell. Now if you haven't seen that fight, it's really good to go back and have a look at it. It's on YouTube. Gennady Golovkin versus Andre Durrell, semi-finals of the Olympic middleweight tournament in Athens. Now for those who don't know about Andre Durrell, very skilled boxer, able to fight out of orthodox or southpaw stance, can change stances seamlessly, very adept at both stances, and a very tricky, very technical boxer. And I think he'd beaten Golovkin the year before, I might be wrong, so a lot was expected of this matchup. If you go and look at Golovkin in this fight, you'll see him as a very fluid, very technical, very mobile boxer, and he's given Andre Durrell a lot of problems. Very close fight, but Golovkin won it, and it said to me that here was a real talent. Like I say, go and have a look at it, you'll see Golovkin very quick around the ring, cutting off the ring, very mobile, very fast with his punches, his combinations. Very good boxer. So Golovkin progressed to the final, and the final was a bit of an anticlimax. He just didn't turn up. He fought this tall, rangy Russian called Gaibardarek, whom I've never heard of since, and he just wasn't the same Golovkin. Just stale, just didn't see him at the races, and he lost the final, and he won the silver medal. But like I said, completely different, chalk and cheese from the fighter who fought Andre Durrell. Just wasn't there. Sometimes it happens. Golovkin then stayed as an amateur for another year, and then he turned pro in 2006. He went with a German promoter called Universidam Box Sport, if I remember rightly. And big things were expected of him, and he went to train in Germany, and a lot of people thought, here he goes, he's gonna, he's got all the tools, gonna go on and get those titles very quickly. Now just before I go into his career and his time with Universidad, I just want to say something, that it was a very brave step for Golovkin to come out of that Kazakh amateur boxing system and turn pro. He took a big chance. Now back then, it's easier now I think for a lot of boxers coming out of those countries, those Eastern European countries, but back then it was a big step, because if you're successful in those countries, they have a lot of emphasis put on the Olympic boxing side of things, and if you do well, you're in the top 10 or you get medals, you're well looked after, usually given a cushy job where you can train all the time, you're usually given good accommodation, maybe even a house, and the better you do, the more the state rewards you. So this is why a lot of those boxers don't turn pro, don't take the chance in turning pro, they stay within that system. And the likelihood is, if they're very successful, they'll stay in the system as a coach or an advisor, and they're set up for life. So it's a big step. So Golovkin took a big chance in coming out of that amateur system and turning pro. Now, one thing is very apparent when you watch Golovkin in those early days as a pro. He's added another wrinkle to his game. As well as being very mobile, having a pretty good defence back then, he's setting his feet more, and this leads to him having great punching power. He's dropping people left, right and centre, and quite a feared fighter. So Golovkin's kind of progressing now. But what that leads to is a lot of people don't want to fight him. He's supposed to have fights with Felix Sturm and Hassan and Dam for various versions of the world title, the world middleweight title. By the way, Golovkin turned pro as a middleweight, 160 pounds. And those guys were just avoiding him. And as try as they might, his promoters just didn't seem to be able to get him in the fights. And he was kind of treading water for a long time out there in Germany. Got very frustrated. Golovkin was training in Germany, he didn't like it, and the whole setup was frustrating him, angering him, and it just seemed, like I just said, he's treading water. Promotional company then fell to pieces, and Golovkin's left out on his own. Now, lucky enough, he managed to sign with another promoter, but one thing Golovkin stipulated in that contract, that he was fed up with training in Germany, he didn't want to train in Europe anymore, he wanted to go and train in America, he wanted to go to Big Bear Lake, up there in the San Bernardino Mountains, it's up there at altitude, and he wanted to train with Abel Sanchez. That's where he wanted to go. So his promotional company, as soon as he signed, duly contacted Abel Sanchez and got the ball rolling. Sanchez said, yep, send him out and we'll see what he's like. And Sanchez famously tells the story of arriving at the airport and seeing Golovkin come through the departure lounge and looking for Golovkin's luggage, and all Golovkin had was this small holdall with just a few possessions and a few clothes in it. No other luggage. So Sanchez gets him there to the facility, and those who don't know about the facility, like I said, it's up there in the mountains. You've got accommodation above the gym, you've got you've got a place where you can eat and stuff like that, so you don't have to go far, you just come down for the accommodation, pretty good, and come down straight into the gym, and you're there. Very little distractions up there, and you just train, eat, sleep, repeat. Great runs in the mountains. In the winter there's a lot of snow, and you know, it get very cold and fresh and stuff, and in the summer it's just boiling hot. So it's just a great life for a boxer. Like I say, you're up there at altitude and all you do is rest, eat, sleep and repeat. Now, very quickly his promoters managed to secure him a world title fight. Fought in Panama at the Roberto Duran Stadium in Panama City, and where he faced Milton Nunes and knocked out Nunes in 58 seconds. So things were looking good. Go back to America, has a few more fights, and Golovkin at this time, and I think it's very important to note, very mobile, had a good defence, kept his hands nice and tight, and when the opportunity was there he would strike, set his feet more than he did as an amateur, very powerful. So all the signs were looking great. Now we'll move along to 2012 and a projected fight with Dmitry Pirog. Now, for those who don't know about Pirog, again I urge you to go and look at the wonderful YouTube and study some of his fights. You'll see an incredibly gifted boxer and a guy I believe who could have gone on to be one of the greats in the sport. Had all the talents, came from the East European style of boxing, all the shifting, the great defensive moves, all the fundamentals in place, but years of watching people like Sugar Ray Leonard, Muhammad Ali, Floyd Mayweather, he's just added all these little wrinkles to his game, and he could have gone on to be a great boxer. Now, it's a projected fight between him and Golovkin in 2012, and I believe that would have propelled both of them to being big stars in America, because I think it would have been a classic fight. Golovkin was very fresh, like I say, still had all his skills, still had great boxing ability, and against Pirog I think it would have been a great matchup, and like I said, would have propelled both guys to being superstars. Unfortunately, Pirog got a back injury, ruptured a disc in his spine, and was never able to come back and compete as a boxer. Tried a couple of comebacks here and there, but his back kept letting him down, and in the end he just drifted out of the sport. But like I said, and I'll emphasise again, I think this would have been a classic fight between two great boxers, but unfortunately it never happened. So after this, again I feel Golovkin was treading water. There wasn't the greatest opponents out there in the division, and if whoever there was, either they were injured or his promoters weren't able to make the fights, and again Golovkin seemed to be treading water. Now kind of drifted away from watching Golovkin, and I was just in the background, and the first time I really got a good look at him again was against Kell Brook. And I know Kell Brook was coming up 2 weight divisions and Golovkin should have steamrolled him and stuff. And I was kind of shocked, I think, after the first round, because Kell Brook was giving Golovkin a lot of problems. Golovkin was backing up in straight lines, he was getting hit a lot, he just seemed slow, his feet weren't moving as well as they used to. In the weigh-in he looked drained, he looked tired, he didn't look a happy fighter. And yes, I know he went on to win and he broke Kell Brook's eye socket, but it wasn't the Golovkin I know. And it seemed like some of his skills had been eroded. He wasn't shifting, his defence wasn't as tight as it used to be. I mean, if you go back to those early fights in America, he was even doing a shoulder roll. I know it sounds weird, but he had very, very good defence back then. And that seemed to be, I don't know, just didn't seem to be there. But he beat Kell Brook, and then up came Danny Jacobs. Soon after that, I know he had a couple of fights in between. And again, Jacobs was giving him all kinds of problems. I know Golovkin knocked him down, he still carries that great power, but that fight could well have been a draw. And again, Golovkin didn't seem to have the mobility. He was coming forward in straight lines, going out in straight lines, and it just didn't look at the races. What I think has happened, and I've seen it in a lot of the training videos from Abel Sanchez, is that they were concentrating on this power. Now, I know that it's made Golovkin a huge star, it's brought him a huge fan base and stuff, but it seems to have been concentrated on to the neglect of his other skills. They've concentrated on this power, Golovkin being this terminator of the middleweight division, and the other stuff seems to have been pushed in the background. I can remember there's a sparring video out there with him and Tony Harrison, and Tony Harrison is much younger then, and I think he's 1 division lower or 2 divisions lower, and Harrison's giving him a boxing lesson. So for me there was something that's not right. And when Golovkin is in the training camps and stuff, he looks flabby at times, he doesn't look well, I don't know, it's just my intuition that says there was something seriously wrong. So then he finally secures these fights with Canelo, and we know all the debate, who won, who didn't win. And he seemed to come back a little bit at times in those fights, but again, he was getting caught far too easily. And to cut a long story short, let's dwell on the second Canelo fight, because I think it's very relevant to this video. If you go and look at the first 3 rounds, again, you can see what I'm saying. You see Golovkin is much slower, he's backing up in straight lines, he's getting hit a lot, and there's no vibrancy to his work. Yes, he's catching Canelo at times and stuff like this, but there's not the old Golovkin. If we could have had Golovkin versus Pirog, I think you'd seen a very, very different Golovkin. A very, very different Golovkin in with a world-class fighter. But against Canelo, I said, first 3 rounds of that second fight, he's getting caught a lot, and then he made a major adjustment. He started turning Canelo, not letting Canelo set his feet, and he had a lot more success. wasn't letting Canelo set his feet, was moving in from side to side and then coming in, creating angles and coming in. And for 2 rounds, had great success there. But then went back to the same old Golovkin we've seen the last few years, standing in front of Canelo. I'll hit you, you hit me a bit. Now Canelo's got great upper body movement and great counter punching, but it is 2 guys standing in front of each other fighting over each other's offence. If you're fighting somebody like Canelo, you need to turn him, you need to move him. Like I said, Golovkin for a couple of rounds was doing that, and he had great success at that. But again, both fights could have been scored a draw. They could have gone to Canelo, they could have gone to Golovkin. They were very, very close fights. So now it brings me on to Johnathon Banks. So we'll put Golovkin aside for a second or two, but we'll come back to him. Now, one thing that's always impressed me about Johnathon Banks is if you take a look at his training with Klitschko for the Joshua fight, you'll see that he's, as well as the big heavyweights that are coming in for sparring, you've got a lot of smaller guys, and what he's trying to do is trying to make Vladimir a lot more mobile, move his feet, get in and out of position, and as a big heavyweight try and get him to be a lot more mobile. If you look at the Fury fight, we all know what happens. Vladimir had no answer to Fury's movement at all, and I think that Banks thought if he wants some longevity here, he's got to be able to move. If when he's in with these big guys like Fury, Joshua, maybe even Wilder, I think Klitschko's got to be able to move. Like I say, he had smaller sparring partners in there that were making him move his feet, making him adjust, constantly move, constantly change angles. I think it was a great idea. And then Banks put on the 1 pad and was moving Klitschko around himself. Like I say, constantly making Klitschko move, change angles, come in and out, change the distance, manage the distance, but constantly making Vladimir more mobile, up on his toes, and a much more mobile, flowing fighter. Yep, it didn't work for Joshua, maybe because Vladimir, there was one fight too far, but I did like that training with Vladimir Klitschko. So it brings me back to Golovkin. Now we're going to bring Golovkin back in, and I think one of the things Banks can do with Golovkin is make him more mobile. Yes, his legs aren't going to be the same as they were in 2004, but work on it. Work on him adjusting. Work on him changing the angles. Don't come in and out in straight lines. Move. Get out. Change angles. Throw something. Step over. Step back. Step in. Step out. And I think it's one of the things that Banks will do with Golovkin. Now, if you look at the Steve Rolls fight, another thing that I saw which was joy to my heart was the knockout of Steve Rolls. Golovkin got back into shifting. That means he's an orthodox fighter and he'll shift into southpaw. In the orthodox stance, shifted into southpaw, made the lead hand, the left hand, into a backhand, went to the side of Rolls' face and knocked him out. Now, I love when Golovkin used to shift backwards and forwards because it keeps creating new looks. It keeps the fighter in front of you guessing, because you don't know whether I'm going to come forward and then I'm going to change into southpaw, I'm going to step back, I'm going to change into orthodox. It's a great tool to use, and it's one of the tools that's not used enough in boxing. You'll see Golovkin used to use it, Kovalev uses it from time to time, Pirog uses it, and it's a very, very underrated tool for defence and attack. So I think get back to that, a new trainer, new ideas, get back to firing really fluid, fast combinations. Golovkin's got one of the best jabs in boxing, and get him to step in, step out, and do it smoothly and free flowing. And that jab of Golovkin is a beautiful thing to behold when it's working properly. And I think if you can get Golovkin to move his feet more, swap angles, change angles, and fire that jab out, I think it could well bode well for the future and maybe a third Canelo fight. But I do think Banks can improve Golovkin, and I think he looks a happier fighter. Before the Steve Rolls fight, he looked well, he had a glow to his skin, and he looked more muscular than I've seen him in a while. and he was a little bit more mobile in that Steve Rolls fight than he has been in other fights. Now I think for the next couple of fights, Golovkin needs to be fighting lesser opponents. I know the fans will go mad about that, but I think if you're going to implement those changes that I think Johnathon Banks can make, I feel it's worth having another couple of warm-up fights and working on that stuff and see where it goes. Can you make Golovkin more mobile? Can you get those different techniques into place? Can you teach an old dog new tricks? I think you can. Golovkin, very wise man. He's made a fortune. He's taken a lot of risks in his career, like we said before, and we'll see where this one goes. But I'd like to see a couple more warm-up fights, get Golovkin accustomed to working with Johnathon Banks, and then bring on the big fights. Maybe Billy Joe, maybe another Canelo fight, maybe Golovkin even steps up in weight, who knows. But I'm looking forward to the next few years of Golovkin's career, because I think he can get back to the Golovkin I first saw all those years ago.